Somebody give me a proton energy pill. Now, as they went on their way, he entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, so she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by herself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." This is the wisdom of God. You may be seated. Back in the 70s, there was a movie called The King of Hearts. Did anybody see this King of Hearts? Anybody? It was an art house movie, so it wasn't widely seen, but it was a movie about World War II and a British soldier who finds himself alone wandering in a French town. The town has been abandoned by troops on both sides, as well as the occupants of the village. They've all left. In the meantime, the people from the local insane asylum have escaped, and they have occupied the town. A farcical party erupts. There's all sorts of fun going on with these new inhabitants. Balloons everywhere. People are playing games. They're riding bicycles. They're laughing. They're having a great time. Lots of PDIs. And the British soldier is in panic because he is so fearful that the Germans are going to be there any minute. I recently watched another movie called 1917. It was about World War I. And if there's a reminder of how brutal World War I is, take a look. One of the bloodiest wars in modern history. The soldier was shouting at these people, trying to get them to connect to reality. They needed to get out of there because the Germans were coming. And their response to him was to make him king, and thereby incorporate him into their story and their lives. The story proceeds. The soldier watches these people delight in each other, while just a few miles away, people are in trenches killing each other. Who's civilized? The tide of the war changes. The Germans retreat. The people of the town come back. They see who's there. They round up all the insane people and put them back in the asylum. The last scene is the British soldier standing in front of the asylum, totally naked, holding a cage of canaries. The question asked is, who's the crazy ones? There's kind of a similar thing going on here with Mary and Martha. The ask, which is the sane one. Of course, we know this story. We know the right answer, don't we? It says it right there. Martha was fulfilling her role as a woman. It was the right thing to do socially and conventionally, but Mary, by doing the alarming, potentially wasteful and emotional thing, was doing the right thing, right? The climate was not curious, however, it was downright distressing. Mary didn't ask anybody if it was okay for her to lean down by Jesus' feet. And what about wasting all of that oil? Now, conventionally, Jesus should have been upset, but he wasn't. In truth, there are times we're going through great, intense things, and there are more things important than making lunch. By insane, I don't mean the medical condition of insanity. I don't mean that somebody has something to DSM. I mean socially and culturally, we have an idea in our minds of what is okay and not okay, what is sane and what is insane. Neither Martha or Mary are clinically insane. They could both be referred to as nuts if they get out of living their role in society. Jesus was referred to as being beside himself. The early Christians were called insane because they were cannibals, no less. After all, they were eating the blood and drinking the blood and eating the flesh of Jesus. They were cannibals. They were nuts. They also did crazy things. I mean, they held their possessions in common. They were venture socialists. They took care of each other. In the pandemic, they even took care of strangers. They were nuts. Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, early 2nd century, there are two types of people who are not afraid of death, the insane and the Christians. In Greco-Roman culture, it's built about gods who were little more than human beings, but much more powerful and fickle. They were human beings in type, but they were much stronger, and the way to live was to stay out of their way. Best thing a person could do is live nobly and play with your cards right, and maybe you'll be wealthy. And then the Apostle Paul comes around, and he starts talking about forgiveness of sins. It's preposterous. If whatever you do, you have to pay for it. Grace and forgiveness, redemption and love, all coming from a man who was crucified in Palestine some time ago, and now they eat the flesh and drink the blood of this man? Nuts. I experienced a revelation in the last gun debate, watching the press and some politicians talk about mental illness as the primary cause of gun violence. Mental illness plays a role in mass shootings, along with so many other things. The condition of boys in America, the focus on the individual, drugs, narcissism, dog-eating economy, and of course, there's always guns. It's not as if a person who suffers from mental illness is more violent. The greater violence is embedded in our culture. There's Governor Abbott of Texas talking about the terrible danger of mental illness, and I felt something in my chest that I said, wait a minute. The mentally ill is you. Mass shooters are certainly troubled and dangerous people, and at the same time, persons who say that guns have nothing to do with violence in America are insane. They are far more dangerous. Climate change deniers are insane. They're not just wrong, they're willfully ignorant and dangerous. But for some reason, we allow them to stay in the Senate. I don't get it. In my mind, anyone who denies the reality of climate change is simply delusional and unfit for office. Look how long it has taken us to finally come to understand how mentally ill Donald Trump is. Morning Joe. Anybody watch Morning Joe? Morning Joe has had enough. On one of his long rants, he finally came to say, this man is a heinous human being. Got to stop focusing on people who suffer from bipolar disorder and focus on narcissistic megalomaniacs who danger the society far more than a single mass shooter. Who's really crazy? And which craziness is more hurtful and dangerous? Societies, cultures, nations, governments can also be insane in this broader definition. In college, I took an anthropology class in which we read the books of Colin Turnbull. I don't know if anybody remembers him. He wrote books on cultures. One was called The Mountain People, another was called The Forest People. Anybody know these books? Forest people had a wonderful society. They loved each other. They got along well. The mountain people were violent. And they attacked their neighbors, and they attacked each other. How did that come to be? Well, I ask right now, are we forest people or are we going to be mountain people? Some matters that we consider conventional and accepted are often severely dangerous. Destroying critical ecosystems for economic benefits is nuts. More people die of suicide and car accidents than mass shootings, and these have become acceptable nuisances. In the larger picture, one of the most insane things we have ever done is create something called the automobile. It fills the sky with carbon, creates in us, in our psychology, more self-serving and anger, allows us to kill each other. The automobile is responsible for more damage and harm and death in our world than just about anything else. But we need our cars. We're dependent upon them. It's still a little bit insane. I believe the tire companies and General Motors, in some measure, conspired to get rid of the trolleys in Los Angeles. Can you imagine how more accessible and wonderful LA would be with trolleys? I lived there. It would be. The amount of money that the world spends making weapons of war is insane. Budget is an ethical document, and our spending on the military while not taking care of the least of these in America, yes. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and there will be more suffering because of that than just about anything else. An AR-15 in the hands of a civilian is insane, isn't it? How dare we casually blame mass shootings on people who suffer from mental illness? It's not the boy in 8th grade who has depression who's dangerous. It's the bully who gets into teasing, insulting, and ostracizing others who's responsible for the violence. And that stays with them through life. We've got to stop implying that mentally ill people are dangerous people, responsible for their mental illness, which causes damage to society. And to see them as, we need to see them as people who are suffering. These are symptoms of the disease that we all have. People who are diagnosed with mental illness do not need blame. They need to be cared for as people who suffer and to be included wherever they go. I have family and friends who have been diagnosed with mental illness. I know they suffer. I know that mental illness can cause danger in life. But the people I've known who are diagnosed with mental illness are some of the most gentle people in the world. They're suffering. It's our culture that's diseased. Did you know that Pramila Jayapal is receiving death threats? Did you know that? How many people have been receiving death threats for speaking out today? It's insane. Who is really crazy? The early Christians were called nuts because they didn't do what was conventional in Roman society, and Roman society feared that they would disrupt society. Paul was allowing women to be leaders. These Christians do strange things. They take care of each other. They value women and children. They live in community. They don't have private property. Imagine no private property. That would be nuts, right? Or maybe not. The healthcare system in America is insane. Conspiracy theories are insane. Did you hear the one about the Italian satellites who somehow influence voting machines? Who's really crazy? Who are we going to be? The forest people or the mountain people? Who is more insane? The depressed boy in junior high or the teenager carrying around an AR-15? Whose mental illness brings more danger to the world, the homeless person or Donald Trump's? The traditional, accepted interpretation of the story of Mary and Martha, that there are times when we must prioritize our faith in Jesus over the needs and necessities of everyday life. There are times also when we must work and plan and prepare, but we should not forget our primary devotion to Jesus, and that's a great meaning and truth. But I also felt in this an invitation to consider which is more harmful to society. It isn't the person who gets depressed. It isn't really even about individuals. It's about a culture and the nature of our society. And from my perspective, it's been really insane. In the movie King of Hearts, the residents of the insane asylum made him the King of Hearts in order to incorporate him into their reality and their game, in order to protect him from all those normal people coming back into the town who were the real insane people. With that in mind, I kind of wonder, maybe the best thing to do is go out and buy some canaries in a cage and see where it leads me. Amen.